My son shoved me and my husband off a 90-foot cliff, and my husband's hidden iPhone caught the whole thing. On the recording, my daughter-in-law, Tessa, actually said the words out loud that they'd practiced the accident. And in the hospital, a nurse heard my son, Evan, lean close and whisper my dead boy's name like it was a warning. I had broken ribs, blood in my mouth, and I stayed perfectly still while they celebrated like they'd nailed a party trick. The worst part wasn't the fall. It was the sick click in my stomach that said Caleb didn't fall either. Back in March, Evan showed up at my kitchen door with a pink bakery box and that bright, polished smile he saves for when he wants something. Roy was in the garage shop, sanding a cabinet door, and I remember thinking, well, at least he's being sweet today. 2 steps into my house and Tessa was already scanning it like a realtor. Her eyes did that slow sweep, crown molding, floors, my little framed photo wall, like she was counting what could be boxed up. Family can turn into paperwork fast. And paperwork can turn into a weapon. Tessa kissed my cheek and called me Mama Marlene, real sing-songy, and it would have been charming if my skin hadn't prickled like I'd walked through spider webs. Roy came in wiping sawdust off his hands, and Evan clapped him on the shoulder like they were buddies instead of father and son. Evan said, "We brought kolaches. Don't yell at me. I know you like the jalapeno ones." "Bless you," I said, because I'm still me, even when my gut is whispering. We sat at that oak kitchen table Roy built 20 years ago. The same table we used to cram around on Sundays when Caleb was alive, laughing too loud, talking over each other, passing biscuits like the world was safe. That table has seen everything. It just never talked back. Evan slid the bakery box toward me, then set his phone down, screen up, right beside my coffee mug, not casually, not absent-minded, placed. Tessa pulled a manila folder out of her tote bag like she was producing a rabbit from a hat. She said, "So we talked to an attorney friend, just to make sure everything's protected." Roy's face tightened a little. "Protected from what?" Evan laughed like Roy had told a joke. "Dad, come on." "From life, from the state, from taxes. You know how it is." Here's the thing, Roy and I weren't helpless. We weren't rich, but we had a paid-off house in Asheville, 2 decent cars, our Wells Fargo accounts, Roy's old union pension from his best years, and my retirement. About 200 grand in assets if you stacked it all up, not a fortune, a lifetime. And suddenly my son was acting like we were a case file. Tessa opened the folder and tapped the top page with a fresh manicure. "We just think it's responsible to update your will. Since, you know, life happens." Her smile held. Her eyes didn't. Roy said, "We were already planning to go see someone, Marcus Ellison, down by the courthouse." Evan's brows lifted a hair. "Oh, you already picked him?" Roy nodded. "He did the deed paperwork years back." Evan leaned back like he was relieved, but something in his jaw set, like we'd stepped onto a board he didn't place. Control hates surprises. Even tiny ones. Tessa said, "That's fine. Marcus is great. We can all go together easier." And that was the first time I felt it, how they kept using we. Not you two, not mom and dad, we. Evan reached across the table and covered my hand with his, warm and heavy. "Mom, you've been through enough. You deserve to relax. Let us handle the hard stuff." I stared at his hand on mine, same fingers that used to bring me dandelions from the yard when he was 6, same hand now pressing down like a paperweight. I slid my hand free. "I'm capable of handling my own hard stuff." Tessa's laugh came out light as a bell. "Of course you are. It's just, why should you have to?" Because autonomy isn't something you handle. It's something you have, or you lose. 2 days later, we were in Marcus Ellison's office. Beige walls, framed diplomas, little bowl of mints that no one ever eats. Evan and Tessa sat close together like a matching set. Roy sat beside me, knee bouncing under the desk. Marcus asked the normal questions: names, assets, beneficiaries, end-of-life preferences. And then Evan cleared his throat and said, "So, here's what makes the most sense. Mom and Dad named me as the primary and Tessa as backup. We'll distribute everything fairly between the kids and any family later. It's cleaner. Cleaner for who? Roy blinked. Between the kids? What kids? You mean Noah and Mia? Evan nodded. Yeah, their future. I watched Tessa's face when Evan said, cleaner. She looked pleased, like he'd said the correct password. Marcus glanced at Roy and me. That's an option, but you can also name your grandchildren directly or include contingencies. Evan smiled at Marcus like they were co-workers. Right, but that gets messy, doesn't it? Courts, delays. If it's me, it's simple. Roy said, simple isn't always better. Evan's eyes cut to Roy, just for a second, cold. Then he warmed them back up and said, Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be. Tessa leaned toward me, voice soft. We're a united family, forever. She whispered it like a vow. It landed like a threat. Love can sound like a contract, and a contract can sound like love. I swallowed and said, why can't Roy and I just split it between you and Caleb? The air changed so fast it felt like someone opened a freezer. Evan's smile froze. Roy's knee stopped bouncing. Tessa's gaze dropped to the desk like she was studying the wood grain. I hadn't meant to do it. I mean, I did, but I didn't. Caleb's name is still muscle memory in my mouth. I say it without thinking. And then I remember I'm not supposed to. Evan cleared his throat too loud. Mom! I nodded quickly. Sorry, habit. Marcus, bless him, didn't flinch. He just said, gently, we can structure it however you want. There's no rush. But Evan looked at Marcus and said, there kind of is. And then he laughed like he'd been kidding. But his eyes weren't kidding at all. That was the controversial moment for me. Not the will, really. It was the audacity. The way he tried to put a deadline on my life. So I'm going to ask you straight. Comment below. Would you ever let your adult child set a deadline on your decisions like that? Because I sat there in that beige office and I felt my own son trying to climb into the driver's seat of my whole existence. Marcus printed drafts. We didn't sign that day. Roy insisted we sleep on it, and Evan nodded like a man who'd just been told maybe on a job interview. On the walk to the parking lot, Tessa looped her arm through mine, like we were best friends. You did great in there, Mama Marlene. I know legal stuff is stressful. I taught second grade, I said. I can handle stressful. She smiled wider. Oh, I know. That's why we're lucky to have you. Lucky. Like I was a resource. We got home, and Roy went straight to the garage. When he's bothered, he builds things. He fixes what he can touch. I followed him out there and leaned on the doorframe, watching him clamp a board down. The shop smelled like pine and motor oil and the clean sharpness of sawdust. It used to calm me. That day, it didn't. Roy said, without looking up, he's just trying to be responsible. I said, no, he's trying to be in charge. Roy tightened a clamp hard enough the wood creaked. Marlene. I saw her eyes, I said. Tessa's. She was measuring our life like it's a listing. Roy finally looked at me, and there was something tired in his face. You're letting fear run you. I laughed once, sharp. Fear? Roy, I buried a child. You don't get to tell me what fear is. He flinched like I'd slapped him, and I hated that I'd said it that way, but it came out anyway. Some couples fight about money. We were fighting about reality. Over the next 2 weeks, Evan's check-ins multiplied. He'd call in the morning, call again after dinner. If I didn't answer, he'd text, everything okay? Then Mom, then please respond. It looked caring on paper. It felt like surveillance. Tessa started dropping by with little gifts, new tea, a candle, a framed photo of Noah and Mia. She'd set them on my counter like offerings. And every visit came with a question. Have y'all thought about downsizing? Do you still have that life insurance policy? Have you named beneficiaries on your Vanguard account? Do you have a list of passwords somewhere safe? One afternoon, she said, it would be safer if Evan had access to your accounts in case something happens, like if you fall, or Roy has a stroke. I stared at her. Roy is standing right here. She didn't miss a beat. I'm just being practical. practical can be cruel, and cruel can wear lipstick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling fan, listening to Roy breathe. My mind kept replaying Tessa's voice saying, "In case something happens," like she was describing weather. At 2:11 a.m., I got up, padded into the kitchen and opened our folder drawer, the one with the deed, the car titles, the birth certificates, all the boring stuff that becomes suddenly important when someone else wants it. The will drafts were sitting on top, crisp and clean, Evan's future on paper. My hands shook, not the dainty kind, the ugly kind. So I did what I should have done sooner. I called my sister. Denise answered on the second ring like she'd been awake already. "Marlene, what's wrong?" "I think Evan's trying to take over," I whispered. Denise didn't do the "oh honey" thing. Denise is a straight shooter. She said, "Okay, tell me exactly what he asked for." When I told her about the will pressure, the house talk, the passwords, she went quiet for a beat. Then she said, "That's not normal. That's a grab." "He's my son," I said, like that explained anything. Denise snorted. "So is a raccoon. When it bites you, still a raccoon. Don't confuse the label." I laughed, but it came out cracked. Denise said, "Do not sign power of attorney. Do you hear me? That's not help. That's handcuffs." That word stuck to my ribs. Handcuffs. The next day, Evan came over alone. No kids, no Tessa. That alone told me it wasn't a family visit. It was a meeting. He sat at my kitchen table, the oak one, and folded his hands like a youth pastor. "Mom, we need to talk about a power of attorney." I set my coffee down carefully. "No." He blinked like he hadn't heard me. "It's just in case." "No," I said again. Evan's smile thinned. "Why are you being difficult?" I laughed because it was so familiar. That's what men say when a woman refuses to hand them her steering wheel. "I'm not being difficult," I said. "I'm being alive." Evan's jaw worked. "You're being irrational." There it was, the little slap word. The word you use when you want to dismiss someone without addressing what they're saying. I stood up, palms flat on the table. "Don't talk to me like that in my house." He stood too, and he's taller than me now, and broad in the shoulders, and for a second, I saw a stranger standing where my son used to be. He lowered his voice. "Mom, if you don't do this the easy way, it's going to get messy." My stomach dipped. "Messy how?" He smiled again. "Too quick. Legally messy, court messy, probate messy. You don't want that." Threats don't always come with shouting. Sometimes they come with a smile. I said, "Get out." He stared at me like he was deciding whether I meant it. Then he grabbed his keys off the counter and walked out without saying goodbye. When the door shut, my knees went soft. I sat down at the table and stared at the wood grain, tracing the knots like they were road maps. Roy came in from the garage and saw my face. "What happened?" He asked for power of attorney. I said. I told him no. Roy rubbed a hand over his mouth. "Marlene, he's probably just—" "Stop," I snapped. "Stop defending him." Roy's eyes narrowed. "I'm not defending. I'm trying to keep peace." "Peace with who?" I said, "because it sure isn't peace with me." Roy's shoulders sagged, and that's when I noticed he looked scared. Not for me, for himself, like my refusal had triggered something in him that he'd been trying not to wake up. I lowered my voice. "Roy, why are you shaking?" He stared at the garage door like it might open and swallow him. "I'm not shaking." "You are," I said. "And I've been married to you long enough to know when you're lying." Roy sat down slowly, like his joints had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He put both hands on the table. And when he finally looked at me, his eyes were glossy in a way I almost never see. He said, "You keep bringing up Caleb." My throat tightened. "Because he's our son." Roy swallowed hard. "And because you think Evan had something to do with what happened." The room went quiet, except for the refrigerator humming. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mouth went dry. Roy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Marlene, There are things about that night you don't know." My heart started pounding so loud I felt it in my ears. "Roy." He flinched at my tone. I stood up, then sat back down, then stood again, like my body didn't know what to do with the truth trying to come in. Roy stared at the table. He said, "I thought keeping quiet was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" I asked, and my voice sounded far away. Roy's fingers curled into the edge of the oak. "From losing my last son." That sentence hit like a thrown brick. Because you can't say last son unless you believe the first one was taken, not lost, taken. The past doesn't stay buried. It waits. Roy opened his mouth like he was about to confess the worst thing a husband can confess to his wife, and my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Tessa. "Hey, Mama Marlene, smile y'all free this weekend? Evan wants to plan something special." I stared at the screen, then at Roy's face, and I knew, whatever Roy was about to tell me, Evan and Tessa were already moving. And I had a feeling their something special wasn't a dinner reservation. I didn't text back. I just looked at Roy and said, "Tell me what you saw." And he finally did. Roy didn't launch into some big speech. He just sat there at our oak table like his bones had turned to wet sand, and he said, "Okay," the way you say it before you walk into a storm. Then he got up and headed for the garage. I followed him, barefoot on the cold concrete, and the whole time my brain was screaming, "Don't let him stall! Don't let him hide again." But Roy wasn't stalling. He was going to where he'd buried it. He yanked open the bottom drawer of his old tool chest, the one that sticks unless you lift and pull at the same time, and out came a flat cardboard box, the kind you'd use for Christmas ornaments, except this one had my handwriting on it, faded, Caleb stuff. My throat went tight so fast I almost gagged. Roy set it on the workbench and didn't open it right away. He just stared at the tape like it might bite him. Finally, he said, "I didn't keep quiet because I didn't care. I kept quiet because I was scared of what I'd already done." That was my first punch in the gut. Because when a man says that, he's not talking about feelings. He's talking about actions. Roy peeled the tape back slow. Inside were old pictures, a small Bible from Caleb's nightstand, a stack of printed papers I didn't recognize, and, God help me, a plastic evidence bag with a property sticker still on it, the kind police use. Roy touched that bag like it was hot. They gave it back to me when they closed the case. "They closed the case," I repeated, like my mouth was trying to learn a new language. Roy nodded once. "They called it an accident, a fall at the river gorge. Nobody to blame, just tragedy." I didn't sit down, I couldn't. I leaned against the workbench and waited for the part that was going to split my life open. Roy picked up a photo first. It was Caleb at 22, standing by our white Ford F-150 back when it still looked new. He had that grin that made you forgive him even when you were trying not to. Roy swallowed. That night Caleb disappeared. Evan wasn't home. My heart did this weird little skip, like it wanted to deny what it already understood. Evan was 16. "Yeah," Roy said, voice rough. "And he told us he was sleeping at a buddy's place. I didn't question it. He'd been—" Roy stopped, then started again. "He'd been moody. You remember. Teenager stuff." I remembered. Evan slamming doors. Evan sulking through dinner. Evan acting like Caleb was the son, and he was stuck in the shade. Roy pulled out one of the papers. It was a copy of an incident report, creased, yellowing at the edges. I could see a case number and a date in October, and I could see our address in Asheville. My hands started shaking. "Why do you have that?" Roy didn't look up, because it never sat right. And there it was, Roy admitting in plain language that he'd been living with a wrongness for 25 years. He pointed at a line on the report. "Evan returned home at 3:12 a.m. I stared at him. We didn't know that. Roy's eyes flicked up and away. I did. My mouth fell open. "Roy." He held up a hand, palm out, like he was bracing himself. I heard the truck. I went to the window. Evan came in through the side door. He had mud up his jeans and his hands were scraped. Not just a little, like he'd slid down rock. My stomach rolled. And you said nothing? Roy's face crumpled. I asked him where he'd been. He said, out. That's all, out. Then he looked at me. Marlene, I swear to you, he looked at me like a grown man, not a kid. Roy swallowed hard. And he said, if you want me in this family, you'll stop asking. Cold traveled up my arms. That was not teenager stuff. That was a line in the sand. Roy's voice dropped even more. So I stopped asking. I couldn't breathe right. I pressed my hand to my chest and tried to slow myself down. Did you tell the police? Roy's eyes went glossy. No. Why? I snapped, and I hated how sharp it came out, but it did. Roy flinched. Because Caleb was missing. You were falling apart. Evan was still here. He rubbed his face like he was trying to wipe the past off. I kept telling myself, maybe he'd just been joyriding. Maybe he'd met friends. Maybe he'd been stupid and got into a fight. Anything but what my gut was whispering. I stared at the evidence bag again. What's in that? Roy opened it like he'd done it 100 times and hated himself every time. Inside was a small silver chain. Caleb's chain. The one with the little cross he wore when he went out. Roy's voice cracked. They found it near the gorge trail. No body. Just that. I took the bag and my fingers went numb around the plastic. Sometimes grief doesn't come in waves. Sometimes it comes like a chokehold. Roy said Evan told the police he was asleep all night. He said it easy. Like it was practiced. I looked up so fast my neck hurt. Practiced? Roy didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. Then he said, a week after they closed it, I found something else. He reached deeper into the box and pulled out a wrinkled receipt, a gas station receipt. Asheville address printed at the top, dated the night Caleb disappeared, time stamped after midnight. Roy tapped the bottom. See the last 4 digits? That's my debit card, Wells Fargo. My skin crawled. Roy, you weren't there. I wasn't, he said. Evan had taken my wallet off the counter earlier that week. I assumed I'd misplaced it. He found it later. My ears started ringing. Here was the first tangible proof, sitting in Roy's calloused hand like a curse, a Wells Fargo card used at a gas station near the river gorge the night our son disappeared, and Roy wasn't the one who used it. Roy whispered, I kept that receipt because I thought if I ever needed to prove. He stopped and breathed in hard. I didn't do anything with it. I just kept it. I stared at him. So you suspected. All these years, and you still let Evan bring his family to my table. You still let him call me irrational. Roy squeezed his eyes shut like he deserved every word. I know. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit the wall. I wanted to go back in time and shake younger me by the shoulders and say, don't let your love make you blind. Instead, I said, very quietly, what changed now? Roy looked at me and his face got hard in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Because he's doing it again. He's not asking for help, Marlene. He's building a cage. That was a cold line. It landed in the garage air and just hung there. We went back inside, and Roy made coffee even though it was late afternoon, because that's what you do in this part of the world when your life is cracking. Put something hot in a cup so your hands have a job. While Roy was messing with the coffee maker, I grabbed my iPhone 13 mini off the counter and opened Tessa's last text again, the one with the little smiley face, the one pretending this weekend was about family. I stared at it and thought, you have no idea what Roy just handed me. Then my phone buzzed again. Tessa, Evan says y'all didn't respond, just checking relieved face. That little calm face emoji almost made me throw the phone. Roy walked in and saw my expression. What now? She's pushing, I said. They want this weekend. Roy set the mug down too hard. Coffee sloshed. We're not going. And then, like the universe loves timing, Evan called. Roy didn't pick up. I did. Hi, Mom, Evan said, voice bright, like we hadn't just drawn blood in the garage. So we're thinking Saturday. Noah's got a break from his soccer thing. Mia's been begging to see y'all. We'll make it easy. Just come with us for a little drive. Fresh air. You two deserve it. A little drive. Fresh air. I kept my voice steady. Saturday doesn't work. There was a half-second pause, then Evan laughed. "What do you mean it doesn't work?" I glanced at Roy. He was standing by the sink, frozen, watching me like I was defusing a bomb. "I mean," I said, "we're busy." "With what?" Evan asked, still laughing, but his laugh had an edge now, like a serrated knife. I let a beat pass on purpose. "Roy's got projects." Evan exhaled through his nose. "Mom, don't do this." "Don't do what?" I asked, soft. "Play games," Evan said. I stared at the kitchen window, at our little backyard, at the bird feeder Roy refills like clockwork. "Evan," I said, "you're the one playing games." Silence. Then Evan's voice dropped lower. "Okay, so what's going on? Because Tessa says you've been weird." My jaw clenched. Maybe I'm tired of being managed. Evan let out a short, sharp breath. "Nobody's managing you." And I thought, you're lying right into my ear like you've done it your whole life. I said, "We'll see you Sunday for dinner, like always." Evan's voice turned sweet again, too fast. "Sure, Sunday. Love you, Mom." When I hung up, my hands were shaking so hard I had to set the phone down with both palms. Roy said, "He's not going to drop it." "No," I said. "He's going to tighten it." We needed somebody outside our house, somebody who wasn't scared of Evan, somebody who didn't have 25 years of guilt wrapped around their ribs. So I called Denise. She answered with, "Tell me you didn't sign anything." "No," I said, "but Roy just told me something, and I feel like I'm going to throw up." I put her on speaker and told her about the police report, the gas receipt, Evan coming home scratched up at 3 in the morning, that awful sentence Evan said to Roy back then. Denise went dead quiet. Then she said, "Oh, Marlene." I didn't want sympathy. I wanted a plan. Denise cleared her throat. "Okay, first, you're not alone. Second, you're going to start making copies of everything. Paper, screenshots, bank statements. Third, you're going to talk to Marcus Ellison again. Alone. Not with Evan. Not with Tessa. Alone." Roy finally spoke, voice hoarse. "Denise, if I go to the police..." I lied back then. Denise didn't sugarcoat it. "Then you tell the truth now and let the chips fall. You can't protect your family by protecting the person hurting it." Roy looked like he'd been punched, but he nodded. Denise went on. "And listen, Marlene, if they're sniffing around your accounts and your will, you need to check your Wells Fargo activity today, like right now." That sentence snapped something in me, because up until then, it was dread and old grief and Roy's confession. But Denise dragged it into the present where I could actually do something. So I opened the Wells Fargo app. Roy and I share logins. We always have. It's not fancy, it's just how we do it. I scrolled through recent activity, and there it was. A Zelle transfer I didn't recognize, $900. Sent 2 weeks ago. The recipient name was a phone number and a first name, Tessa. My vision tunneled. I clicked it. Memo line. Riem. I felt heat rush up my neck. "Roy," I said, voice thin, "did you send Tessa $900? Roy's face drained. "No." Denise, still on speaker, said, "Screenshot it right now." I took the screenshot with my thumb like I was in a trance. My hands were clumsy. My heart was galloping. Roy grabbed his iPhone 12 from the counter and started flipping through his text messages with Evan, jaw clenched. Then he froze. He turned the phone toward me. "Look." Evan had texted Roy 2 weeks ago. "Hey, Dad, can you Zelle Tessa from Mia's dentist? I'll pay you back Friday. Easier if it comes from your account." Roy's reply, "Okay." Roy whispered, "I didn't send it." Denise said, flat, "That means somebody sent it using your access." I looked at Roy's face. "But how?" Roy stared down at his phone like it was suddenly a stranger. "Evan set up my banking app when I got that new phone last year. Remember? He said he'd make it easy." My stomach flipped. Convenience is how control gets in the door. It doesn't kick it down. It walks in smiling. Denise said, "Change your passwords today and call Wells Fargo. Tell them you have unauthorized transfers." Roy looked panicked. What if that sets him off? Denise's voice went hard. "He's already off. You're just late to the party." Roy and I spent the next hour doing things I never thought I'd have to do against my own son. Resetting passwords, turning on two-factor authentication, writing down new codes on a legal pad like we were teenagers hiding secrets from our parents. I called Wells Fargo and waited on hold, listening to that cheerful music that feels like a joke when your life is burning. When I finally got a human, I kept my voice calm. I said, "There's a Zelle transfer I didn't authorize. I need to report it." The representative asked questions, and I answered, and Roy paced behind me like a trapped animal. When the representative said, "Ma'am, do you know who might have access to your account?" I stared at my kitchen wall and felt my insides twist. I said yes. I didn't say his name out loud, not yet. After I hung up, Roy sat down at the table and put his head in his hands. I wanted to comfort him. I also wanted to shake him, so I did neither. I just stood there and breathed. Then my iPhone buzzed again. An email notification from Marcus Ellison's office. Subject line, estate drafts plus POA discussion. My mouth went dry. I opened it, and there it was in plain black and white. Marcus confirming that Evan and Tessa had requested a power of attorney for convenience, and that Marcus wanted to meet with Roy and me privately to ensure we weren't being pressured. Marcus had written, "I strongly recommend you do not sign any POA without independent counsel and a private conversation." A second receipt. An adult, professional one. I forwarded it to Denise immediately and then printed it, because paper feels real when you're trying not to spiral. Roy looked up at the sound of the printer whirring. "Marcus knows." "Yeah," I said, and Marcus put it in writing. Roy's face tightened. Evan's gonna hate that. I stared at the freshly printed email and said, "I don't care what he hates. I care what he's doing." Roy looked like he wanted to argue. Then he didn't. He just nodded once, slow. That night, we didn't do our normal routine. No TV, no mindless scrolling. Roy sat at the table with the old incident report and the gas receipt, and I sat across from him with my phone, digging through years of saved photos like a woman looking for landmines. Wait, there's something I forgot to mention. Caleb's disappearance wasn't just a sad thing that happened. It split our family down the middle in quiet ways. Evan used to get angry if I kept Caleb's photo up. He'd say things like, "You're obsessed," and "He's gone, Mom," and I told myself that was grief talking. Now I wondered if it was fear. Around 10 p.m., I texted Janine, my other sister, just a simple, "Are you awake?" She called me within minutes because Janine is the kind of woman who senses trouble through a screen. I didn't dump everything on her. I couldn't, not all at once. I just said, "Roy remembered something about the night Caleb went missing, and now Evan's pushing hard around money." Janine went quiet, then said, "Marlene, I always thought Evan was off." My skin prickled. "Why didn't you say that?" "Because you'd have hated me for it," Janine said, voice gentle, "and because Roy never let anyone talk about Caleb for too long. He'd shut down." I stared at Roy across the table. Roy was staring right back like he could feel his name being spoken in my other sister's mouth. Janine continued, "After the funeral, Evan told me something weird. He told me you needed to move on and that he'd handle Dad. I thought it was just him trying to be the man of the family." The hair on my arms stood up. "Handle Dad." Roy mouthed, "What?" silently. I told Janine I'd call her tomorrow and hung up. Roy said, "He said that to Janine?" "Apparently," I said. Roy's face went pale. "He's been planning longer than we thought." Another cold line, and it made the room feel smaller. The next morning, Roy and I drove to Marcus Ellison's office ourselves. No Evan, no Tessa. Just us, in my silver Toyota Camry, both of us quiet like we were going to court. Marcus let us in through the side door like he already understood the vibe. He didn't offer mints. He didn't do small talk. He shut his office door and said, "Tell me what's happening." So we did. Roy told him about the old case report and the gas receipt. I told him about the Zelle transfer and the pressure campaign. Marcus's face tightened in a way that made my chest loosen a fraction. Because when an attorney looks alarmed, you're not crazy, you're late. Marcus said, first, you're not signing any POA. Second, we're going to lock down your will in a way that prevents unilateral changes. Third, I'm going to document that you raised concerns about undue influence. Roy swallowed. Can we talk to police about Caleb? Marcus nodded slowly. You can, but you need to understand, it might reopen questions about who knew what and when. Roy's eyes flicked to me, guilty. I held his gaze and didn't flinch. Sometimes love is saying, we're going to tell the truth, even if it hurts us. Marcus slid a legal pad toward us. Write down everything you remember. Dates, places, statements. Don't embellish, don't guess, just facts. Roy hesitated, then wrote the sentence Evan had said at 16. If you want me in this family, you'll stop asking. Marcus underlined it. That's not normal. No, I said, it's not. Then Marcus asked me, do you have any reason to believe your son has accessed your accounts or personal documents beyond that Zelle transfer? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot. Marcus's mouth tightened. Good, keep doing that. Receipts matter. I didn't smile, but something in me steadied. Because I understand classrooms. I understand systems. I understand that proof is the difference between feelings and consequences. When we got home, we pulled every financial folder we had, Wells Fargo statements, Vanguard statements, insurance papers, and spread them on the dining table like we were building a caseboard. That's when Roy found it. A credit card statement we didn't recognize. Not from Wells Fargo, not from our usual stuff. It was a brand new account, mailed to us 2 months ago, opened in Roy's name. Roy stared at it like it was written in another language. I didn't open this. My voice went quiet. No, somebody opened it for you. Roy's hands started shaking again. How? I looked at the statement header and felt my stomach drop all over again. The mailing address was ours. The email on file was not. It was an email I recognized because I'd seen it once before on Tessa's laptop when she accidentally had it open at our house. tessawhitaker.family@gmail.com. I didn't say anything right away. I just pointed. Roy followed my finger. His face went slack. Oh my God. That was the third receipt. And it wasn't just theft. It was identity. It was planning. It was bold. And suddenly that something special weekend felt less like a family outing and more like a trap getting built. My phone buzzed, like the universe couldn't resist twisting the knife. A text from Evan this time. Mom, we need to talk. Today, I'm coming by. No question mark. No, is that okay? Just an announcement. I looked at Roy. Roy looked at me. Outside, down our street, I heard the low rumble of an SUV engine slowing, tires crunching on gravel. Roy whispered, "That's him." I stared at the front door like it might explode inward. And all I could think was, we just took the keys away from a man who believes he owns the car. The doorknob turned, and I knew, whatever came out of Evan's mouth next, it wasn't going to be a request. Stay with me, because what he said on my porch is the moment I stopped being scared of my own son. Evan stepped into my doorway like he owned the hinges. He didn't smile. He didn't even do the fake warmth. His eyes went straight past me into the house, past the kitchen, past the dining table covered in papers, like he was checking what we'd been up to. "You've been making calls," he said. "Not hello, not how are you, just an accusation, delivered soft." Roy moved up behind me. I felt him there the way you feel a storm building, pressure, static. Evan glanced at Roy and his mouth twitched, like he was disappointed Roy hadn't already folded. I kept my hand on the door edge. I didn't open it wider. "What do you need, Evan?" He took a slow breath through his nose. "I need you to stop treating Tessa like she's some criminal." That was my first shift, my first real little click of power. Because he didn't say, "Stop treating me," he said, "Tessa." He'd come to defend his teammate. I held his gaze and said, Then she can stop acting like one. Evan's eyes sharpened. What did you just say to me? I didn't back up. My voice came out steady, and that surprised me. I said what I said. Roy made a small sound behind me, like he was trying not to interrupt but couldn't help it. Evan's attention snapped to him. Roy didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He just said, "Get off our accounts." Evan blinked, and in that blink, I saw it. Pure calculation. He hadn't expected us to say the quiet part out loud. "What accounts?" Evan asked, a little too light. "The Wells Fargo," Roy said. "The Zelle. The credit card in my name. Don't play dumb." Evan's face changed. Not angry exactly, more like offended, like we'd accused him of something he felt entitled to do. He let out a short laugh. "Dad, are you kidding me? You think I'm stealing from you?" I watched his eyes while he spoke. He kept flicking to my phone on the counter behind me like he was trying to see if it was recording. So I did something I'd never done with my own child. I lifted my iPhone and set it on the little entry table, screen up, camera facing us. Evan's gaze locked on it. I said, "Say it again." His nostrils flared. "Say what again?" "Say you didn't do anything with our accounts," I said. "Right here. Clear." Evan stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd turned the air into evidence. "Mom, this is insane." "No," I said. "What's insane is a credit card opened in your father's name with your wife's email attached." That landed hard. Evan's jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "Where did you get that?" "In our mail," I said. "Where it was sent." Roy stepped forward, so Evan couldn't ignore him. "I didn't open it." "You know I didn't, so explain." Evan's voice went low. "You're really doing this." Roy didn't blink. "Yeah, I am." Evan looked at Roy for a long second, and something in his expression shifted, like he was weighing which lever to pull. Then he turned back to me. His tone changed completely, softer, concerned, almost tender. "Mom," he said, "this is what I was worried about." I felt my skin crawl. "What are you talking about?" "You're confused," Evan said, like he was diagnosing me. "You've been stressed. You haven't been sleeping. You're spiraling. I told Tessa this might happen." Roy made a sharp sound. "Don't you dare." Evan held up both hands like he was calming a wild animal. "I'm not trying to fight. I'm trying to help." Help, that word again. I said, "If you were helping, you wouldn't be trying to make me sound unstable." Evan's eyes narrowed. "I'm not making you sound like anything. I'm describing what I'm seeing." Roy's hands curled into fists, but he stayed behind me. He was shaking, and I could tell he was forcing himself to stay quiet because he knew Evan liked it when Roy exploded. Evan could point to that and say, "See, he's the problem." Evan's voice turned even more gentle. "Mom, you know I love you, but if you're going to accuse my wife of fraud, we might need to involve people." There it was, a new threat, upgraded. "Involve who?" I asked. Evan sighed like he hated to say it. "Adult Protective Services, a social worker, someone objective." Roy barked out a laugh that wasn't funny. "You mean someone you can manipulate?" Evan's eyes flashed. "Watch your mouth." Roy stepped forward, and for a second I thought they were going to get physical right there on my porch. Then Roy stopped himself, like he remembered the rules of this new game. I said, "Evan, leave." Evan didn't move, not until we clear this up. I looked at him and felt something settle in my chest. Not courage, something colder. I said, "You're not clearing anything up. You're trying to scare us into signing what you want." Evan's face hardened. "You think you can shut me out? You think you can cut me off?" "I think I can protect myself," I said. Evan leaned in a fraction, voice low enough it felt like it was meant just for me. "Mom, don't do this the hard way." And that was the moment. The exact moment I stopped being scared. Because my brain finally labeled it correctly. This wasn't family conflict. This was coercion. I stared at him and said, "The hard way for who?" Evan froze like he hadn't expected a question. I continued, calm as iced tea. Because I'm not the one with unauthorized transfers and a fake email on a credit card application. Roy let out a breath behind me, like he'd been holding it for years. Evan's eyes went to the phone I'd set down, and then, quick as a magician, his expression melted into wounded sun again. "Mom," he said loudly, like he wanted the neighbors to hear, "you're not well." Roy snapped, "Get out." Evan stepped back and lifted his chin. "Fine. If that's what you want," he pointed at Roy. "But when you two end up in court and somebody asks why I tried to help, I'm going to have a lot of answers." He turned like he was leaving, then stopped at the bottom step. He didn't look back when he said it, which made it worse. "And stop digging into Caleb," Evan said. "You're going to hurt yourself." My stomach dropped. Roy went rigid. Evan got into his black Ford Explorer and drove off like he hadn't just dropped a bomb on our porch. Roy whispered, "He knows we talked." I stared at the street, my pulse thudding. Or he's been watching us. Roy's eyes flicked to the window. "How?" I didn't answer because the answer was everywhere. Our phones, our accounts, our routines, every little helpful thing Evan had ever done that gave him a foothold. Roy reached for my iPhone, and I grabbed it first. My fingers were clumsy. I opened the camera roll. There it was, the whole porch exchange on video, because I'd hit record when I set it down. You couldn't see much besides my front steps and Evan's boots, but the audio was clear, especially the part where he said Adult Protective Services. Receipt number 1, and it tasted like metal in my mouth. Roy rubbed his forehead. "We need to call Denise." "I'm already doing it," I said. Denise answered, like she'd been waiting. "Talk to me." I kept my voice low, but it shook anyway. He threatened APS. He tried to paint me as confused. Denise didn't gasp. She didn't do drama. She said of course he did. That's the next move. Roy spoke up, voice tight. He also said to stop digging into Caleb. There was a pause on the line, and then Denise said, "Okay. That means he's nervous." Roy's eyes filled, and he blinked hard. "Or it means he's dangerous." Denise's voice softened just a hair. Both can be true. She told us what to do in that blunt older sister way that makes you move. Lock down everything. Don't meet them alone. Tell Marcus. And this part mattered. Start assuming every contact is for a reason. Also, Denise added, if APS shows up, you don't panic. You show them your home. You show them receipts. You show them you're competent and your accounts were compromised. I swallowed. What if they take Noah and Mia? Denise didn't hesitate. They won't take kids from their parents over a grandparent dispute. Evan's using your fear like a steering wheel. That line hit because it was true. Evan always knew which emotion to press. Roy's hands were still shaking. We should go to the police. Denise said yes, about the fraud at least. And about Caleb, that might be bigger, but you start somewhere. So we did. We drove to the Asheville Police Department in my Camry because Roy didn't trust his truck that day, like he thought anything tied to him could be accessed, tracked, controlled. I get it. When you feel invaded, you start suspecting the air. At the front desk, I said, I need to report identity theft and unauthorized transfers. The officer's face didn't change, like he'd heard it 1,000 times. Maybe he had? They put us in a small interview room with beige walls and a cheap clock. Beige is the official color of bureaucracy, I swear. A younger officer took notes while I handed over printed screenshots, the Zelle transfer to Tessa, the credit card statement, Marcus's email warning about pressure. I made sure my hands didn't tremble too much when I slid the paper across the table. Roy added the gas station receipt from years ago, then stopped himself like he realized what he was doing. His hand hovered, uncertain. The officer glanced at it. What's this? Roy's throat worked. It's connected to something older. The officer's eyes shifted to me, then back to Roy. Sir, let's focus on the current fraud first. We can address anything else later. Roy nodded, but I saw the pain in his face, like he'd finally stepped into the light and someone told him to stand back in the shadows. We got a report number for the fraud. The officer gave us a business card and said a detective might follow up. Might. We walked out of that station feeling both relieved and oddly exposed. like we'd just hung a big sign on ourselves that said, "We know." On the drive home, my phone buzzed again. A text from Tessa. "Hey, Mama Marlene, 2 hearts. Evan said things got heated. I'm sorry. We're just worried about y'all. Please don't shut us out." I stared at it and felt rage move through me so clean it was almost calming. I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, another text. "Also, we really need to discuss Noah and Mia's future. Evan thinks it's best if we keep boundaries if there's going to be accusations." Boundaries, that was her weapon word. Make the threat sound healthy. Roy read it over my shoulder and went pale. "She's going to keep the kids from us." I breathed in slow. "That's what they want you to think." Roy's jaw clenched. "I can't lose them too." I reached over and grabbed his forearm. "Listen to me. We're not begging, we're documenting." Roy stared at me like he didn't recognize my voice. That was okay. I barely recognized it too. At home, I forwarded Tessa's text to Denise and then took another screenshot, just in case. Receipt number 2. And it wasn't money. This one was leverage. Marcus called us back that afternoon after I left him a message. His voice was tight. "Marlene, Roy, Evan called my office." My stomach sank. "What did he say?" Marcus exhaled. "He said you were being manipulated by outside family, and he wanted to schedule an urgent meeting to correct misunderstandings." Roy let out a bitter laugh. "Outside family, that's Denise." Marcus continued. "He also asked if I would provide documentation that you're competent to sign legal documents." I stared at the wall. "He wants a paper that says I'm sane." Marcus didn't say it like that, but his pause did. "Yes." Roy's voice cracked. "Can he do this?" Marcus's tone turned firm, attorney firm. "He can try. But here's what matters. You will not meet with him here. If he shows up, we document. If he files anything, we respond. And Marlene, this is important. You need to stop communicating with them by phone. Text only, email if possible, keep everything." So yeah, that was the plan starting to take shape. We weren't going to out-muscle Evan. We were going to out-document him. That evening, Denise drove down from her side of town like the cavalry in a Ford sedan. She marched into my kitchen, saw the papers on the table, and nodded once like she approved of the mess. Denise said, "Okay, first thing, you 2 are going to set a trap." Roy stiffened. "A trap?" Denise pointed at the credit card statement. "They already set theirs. You're just stepping out of it." Denise laid it out like she was building a lesson plan. God, I miss teaching sometimes, because I understood her brain. She said we needed Evan and Tessa to put their intentions into words we could keep. "Don't poke the bear for fun," Denise said. "But if the bear keeps coming, you make sure the camera is on." Roy looked uneasy. "What if he snaps?" Denise's eyes narrowed. "He's already snapping. He just does it in a nice shirt." She told us to do 3 specific things. 1, change every password again and stop letting Evan help with any technology, ever. 2, put a freeze on Roy's credit, and mine too, because if they could do it to him, they could do it to me. Denise pulled out her phone and walked us through it step by step like a drill sergeant. 3, agree to this weekend, something special, but on our terms, public meetup first, our own car, and Roy's iPhone recording the entire time. Roy stared at her. "You want us to go with them?" Denise nodded. "I want you to make them comfortable enough to keep talking." I felt my stomach twist. That sounds like walking into the lion's mouth? Denise shrugged. "Sometimes that's where the proof is." Roy went pale. "Marlene?" I held up a hand. "Let's talk it through." Because here's the thing. By then, I could feel the trap regardless. If we refused, Evan could weaponize it. Call APS, tell everyone we were unstable, cut off the kids. If we complied blindly, we'd be sheep. But if we complied strategically, we could flip the board. Roy looked sick, but he nodded slowly, like a man agreeing to a surgery he didn't want. Denise leaned closer. "And you don't go anywhere isolated, not an overlook, not a trail, not a private picnic. You keep it public, you keep it witnessed." That line stuck. because it told me Denise's gut had already pictured something worse. Then Roy said something that made the room go quiet. He whispered, "Evan asked us to go for a drive." Denise's eyes flicked to me. "When?" "Today," Roy said, "in that call you took before he came over." Denise sat back, slow. "Okay, that's not a coincidence." The air in my kitchen felt heavy. I said, "What do we do if they insist?" Denise's mouth turned flat. "Then you insist back. You're still the parents. You still say no." Roy rubbed his hands together like he couldn't get warm. He doesn't act like I'm his dad anymore. I didn't even mean to say it, but it came out clean. Then we stop acting like he's our son when he's behaving like our enemy. That was one of those lines that makes the room go still after you say it. Roy looked like I'd slapped him, and then he looked like he agreed and hated himself for it. Denise nodded once. "There you go." That night, I drafted a text to Evan with Denise watching over my shoulder like an editor. I wrote, "We can meet Saturday for lunch, public place, then we'll see." Denise said, "Good, short." Roy said, "Where?" I picked a place we'd actually go, an Asheville diner off a main road. Nothing fancy, lots of people, lots of noise, the kind of spot where a raised voice draws eyes. I sent it. The typing bubble popped up almost instantly, like Evan had been waiting. "Evan, lunch is fine, but after, we're taking you somewhere special. No arguing." My stomach tightened. Denise whispered, "Screenshot." I did. "Evan, it's for family, for closure. You owe us that." "Oh." Roy's face changed at that word. He whispered closure. He's talking about Caleb. Denise's eyes narrowed. Or he's using Caleb as bait. Either way, it wasn't good. I typed back, "We'll decide after lunch." Evan's reply came fast. "Mom, don't embarrass me." And that's when I understood something ugly. Evan wasn't scared of hurting us. He was scared of losing control of the narrative. Receipt number 3, his "no arguing" text, and that "you owe us" line. It read like a command, not a son inviting his parents anywhere. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Wells Fargo, an automated fraud confirmation with a reference number and the words, "under review," plain, sterile language. It should have made me feel safer. Instead, it made me realize how fast Evan could move. Because once a bank starts asking questions, the person who did the thing usually panics. And panic makes people reckless. Around noon, Roy got a call from an unknown number. He didn't answer. It went to voicemail. When he played it, a woman's voice said, "Hello, this is Adult Protective Services. We received a concern call and would like to schedule a wellness check." Roy's face went gray. Denise, who'd been sitting at the table with us again because she refused to leave us alone, muttered, "There it is." Roy's voice shook. "He did it." Denise said, "Or Tessa did. Same team." I felt this strange mix of fear and relief. Fear because APS is serious and invasive. Relief because now we had proof of escalation. Now it was officially outside the family. I called the number back with Denise beside me. I kept my voice polite, steady teacher voice. I said, "Yes, I'm Marlene Whitaker. I'm fine. My husband and I are aware someone in our family is attempting to exert undue influence over our finances and legal documents. We have police report numbers related to identity theft and unauthorized transfers." There was a pause on the line. Then the APS worker's tone shifted, less concerned caller, more, "Okay, there's conflict here." She said, "All right, we still need to do a visit. It's standard." I said, "That's fine. Come tomorrow morning. We'll have documentation ready." Denise smirked like she was proud. Roy didn't look proud. He looked like a man about to be judged by strangers for the crime of trusting his child. When we hung up, Roy whispered, "They're going to think we're crazy." I put my hand over his. "No, they're going to see we're prepared." Denise added, "And if they don't, we make them." The APS visit the next morning was humiliating. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. A woman in a county badge asked us questions in our living room. like we were suspects. She looked around our house, asked if we had food, if we had medicine, if anyone hit anyone. Roy answered calmly. I answered calmly. Denise sat on the couch like an unmovable witness. I handed the APS worker our neat folder, Wells Fargo fraud reference email, screenshots of Evan's texts, the credit card statement, Marcus's email about pressure, the police report number card. I even included a printed copy of the porch video transcript Denise had typed up from the audio, because Denise is that kind of person. The APS worker's eyebrows lifted when she saw tessawhitaker.family@gmail on the credit card statement. She didn't say much, but her face changed. When she stood to leave, she said, "I'm not seeing evidence of neglect or incapacity." Then she looked directly at me. "If someone is trying to take control of your finances, you're doing the right thing by documenting." When the door closed behind her, Roy sagged like a puppet whose strings were cut. Denise said, "You see, paper beats performance." Roy wiped his face with both hands. He's going to be furious. I stared at my phone. Let him. And then, because the universe is rude, Evan called. I didn't answer. I let it ring. He texted instead. "Evan, so you let APS into your house. Wow." My stomach did that slow roll again. Then another text. "Evan, Saturday isn't optional anymore." And another. "Evan, if you don't come, you won't see Noah and Mia again. I swear to God." Roy made a sound like he'd been stabbed. Denise leaned over my shoulder and said, "Screenshot, save, back up." I took screenshots until my camera roll looked like a crime file. Then I typed one sentence back, because Marcus told us, keep it short, keep it clean. I wrote, "Threats won't work. We'll see you at lunch." Evan replied, "Good." One word, like he'd just gotten compliance. Roy stared at that "good" and whispered, "He thinks he's winning." Denise said, "Let him think that." So that was the counterattack plan. In plain terms, we were going to show up, in public, with receipts in our pockets and recording on our phones, and we were going to keep saying no until the mask slipped. Because masks always slip when you don't give people what they want. Saturday came. Gray sky over Asheville, the kind that makes the mountains look like they're holding their breath. Roy and I drove separately from Evan and Tessa, just like we said. Roy insisted on taking his truck, and I followed in my Camry because if something happened, we wanted a second vehicle free. Denise didn't come to the diner, too obvious, but she stayed on standby, phone in hand, like a lifeline. We walked in and Evan was already there with Tessa and the kids. Noah waved, Mia ran to me, and for a split second my whole body tried to pretend we were normal. Then Tessa hugged me too tight and whispered, "Let's not do anything dramatic today." My skin went cold. "Then don't do anything dramatic," I whispered back. Evan smiled at Roy like they were back to being father and son, like no porch fight ever happened. "Dad, glad you came." Roy nodded, jaw tight. "Here." We ate pancakes and eggs while Evan talked about work, and the kids talked about cartoons, and Tessa kept touching Evan's arm like she was grounding him. The whole time, my iPhone sat in my purse recording audio, and Roy's iPhone was recording too, because Denise taught us redundancy. Halfway through the meal, Evan slid an envelope across the table toward Roy. Roy didn't touch it. "What's that?" Evan's smile stayed fixed. "Just something to make everything easier." Tessa chimed in, voice sweet. "It's a family agreement, so we can stop fighting." Roy stared at the envelope like it was a snake. I reached over, pulled it toward me, and opened it right there. Inside was a printed power of attorney form, filled out, names typed in, signature lines waiting like open mouths. Evan said, "We just need you to sign. Then we can go." Roy's face flushed. "No." Evan's smile twitched. "Dad." Roy said it again, louder, steady. "No." Silence spread over our side of the booth. Noah's eyes darted between the adults. Mia stopped chewing. Tessa's voice turned low. "Roy, don't do this in front of the kids." Roy looked straight at her. Then don't bring legal papers to breakfast. Evan's eyes went flat. We're done pretending. There it was, the mask slipping. Finally. Evan leaned in, voice quiet but hard. You're coming after lunch. You're signing, or you're coming anyway. Either way, you're coming. My stomach nodded. Where? I asked. Evan's mouth curved, and it wasn't a smile. Somewhere you should have gone a long time ago. Roy's hand shook on the table. Don't. Evan's eyes locked on Roy. You kept her in the dark, Dad. Now we're gonna fix it. Fix it. That word sounded like a shovel hitting dirt. I slid the power of attorney back into the envelope and stood up. My voice came out calm, and I don't know where I got that calm from, but I used it. We're leaving, I said. Evan's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist under the table, hard enough to hurt. Tessa's eyes widened, but she didn't stop him. Roy stood up so fast the booth shook. Let her go. Evan released me and leaned back like he hadn't done anything. Sit down, Dad. Roy didn't sit. Evan's eyes flicked to the kids. Then he softened his voice again, just for them. Noah, Mia, go with Mom to the car for a second, okay? Daddy needs to talk to Grandma and Grandpa. Noah hesitated. Mia looked confused. Tessa smiled at them, too bright. Go on, sweeties. My heart cracked a little, because even then, even after everything, the kids trusted their parents. Noah slid out. Mia followed, holding my hand. I walked them outside, and Roy trailed behind us. Evan and Tessa came after a moment later, moving like they'd already decided how the day would go. In the parking lot, Evan stepped close to Roy and said, low enough the kids couldn't hear, You're gonna get in my Explorer. Roy's jaw tightened. No. Evan's eyes flashed. Then you won't see them again. Tessa said, softly, like she was offering a compromise. Just come. It'll be quick. I looked at Roy. Roy looked at me. I could see him calculating, like a man trying to choose between two kinds of pain. And then Roy did something I did not expect. He lifted his iPhone 12, held it up between them and said, clear as a bell, say that again, about the kids. Evan froze. Tessa's eyes darted to the phone. Roy's voice didn't shake. I want you on record. Evan's face changed, rage trying to break through politeness. He leaned in and hissed, Turn that off. Roy didn't. He just stared. And Evan, because he couldn't help himself, said it anyway. If you don't get in the car, you'll never see Noah and Mia again, Evan said. Ever. The words sat in the air like exhaust. I felt something inside me go perfectly still. Because now we had it. Clean, clear, no misunderstanding, no concern. A threat, on tape. Evan's gaze flicked to the diner entrance, like he realized too late how public he was being. Then he smiled, sharp, controlled, and said, Good, you got your little clip. He opened the rear door of his Explorer and pointed inside. Now get in, he said. And Roy, with his shoulders squared like a man marching into the worst day of his life, looked at me and whispered, We're not safe here anymore. I stared at Evan's open car door, at the kids' faces, at Tessa's hand resting on Noah's shoulder like a clamp. And I knew the next move mattered. Because if we got in, we might not get out. And if we didn't, Evan would burn our lives down in a different way. Roy's phone was still recording. Evan's eyes were still smiling, and my feet wouldn't move. Stay with me, because what happened in that parking lot is the moment we realized the special place wasn't about closure. I moved first. Not toward Evan's open door, toward my grandkids. I crouched down in front of Noah and Mia, right there on the asphalt, right there in the middle of that parking lot drama, and I smiled like everything was normal, because kids can smell fear like smoke. Hey, I said softly, you two want to help Grandma with something? Noah's eyes flicked to his dad, then back to me. Are we in trouble? My chest squeezed. No, baby. Grown-up stuff. You didn't do anything. Mia clung to my hand, sticky fingers and all. I don't want to go. Tessa stepped forward like she was the reasonable one. "Mia, sweetie, it's okay. Mommy's right here." Her voice was honey. Her hand on Noah's shoulder was steel. Evan was still by his Explorer, still pointing like he was directing traffic. He didn't rush. That was the part that scared me. He wasn't frantic, he was certain. Roy's face was tight, and I could see him doing math in his head that had nothing to do with numbers. I stood up and looked right at Evan. "If you want to talk, we can talk, but the kids ride with me." Evan's eyes narrowed. "No." I didn't blink. "Yes." His jaw ticked. "Mom." I cut him off. "Noah and Mia aren't getting dragged into this." Evan's mouth curled. "Dragged into what? You're the one making a scene." Roy lifted his iPhone again, not as obvious as before, just enough that Evan noticed. "Say no again. About the kids." Evan's eyes flicked to the phone. He hated that thing now. Tessa exhaled like she was tired. "Fine, they can go with you." Then she added, "Quick, after we all go together and have a family day." "That's the point." I shook my head. "No lunch is done. We're done. We're leaving." And that's when Evan's face changed, like a switch flipped behind his eyes. He stepped close enough that I could smell the diner coffee on his breath. "You're not leaving," he said, low and flat. "Not until we finish." Roy took a step toward him. "Back up." Evan didn't back up. He glanced at Noah and Mia, then back at me, and his voice turned sweet in a way that made me want to wash my skin off. "Mom," he said louder, "you're upset. It's okay. But you're going to regret making the kids watch you spiral." Noah stiffened at that word. Spiral, like he understood more than he should. I felt my temper go cold. "Don't talk about me like I'm not standing here." Evan smiled with no warmth. "Then act like you can stand on your own." That was the moment I understood the power play. He wanted the kids to see us as unstable. He wanted witnesses, tiny, innocent witnesses, on his side. I bent down again and looked at Noah. "Go sit in my Camry with Mia, lock the doors, turn on the radio." Noah's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because Grandma said so," I whispered, and I hated that I had to use that tone, the one I used on second graders when there was danger without panic. Noah nodded, grabbed Mia's hand, and they hurried to my silver Camry. I watched them climb in, watched Noah lock the doors like he'd seen it on TV. He pressed the lock button twice, just to be sure. Evan watched too, and I saw it in his face. He didn't like losing the kids as props. Roy leaned toward me and murmured, "We need Denise to know where we are." I nodded and slid my iPhone out of my purse. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. I opened messages and hit Denise's name. I sent one thing, Roy's audio clip from the parking lot, the one where Evan threatened to cut us off from the kids. Then I sent a second message, Evan forcing us to go somewhere after lunch. If we don't answer in 30 minutes, call APD. I didn't wait for a reply. Proof isn't just what you keep. It's what you send. Evan's eyes flicked to my phone. "What did you just do?" Texted my sister. I said. His nostrils flared. "You're making this worse." I tilted my head. "No, I'm making it visible." Roy's iPhone was still recording. I saw the red bar at the top of his screen before he slid it into his front shirt pocket. Evan leaned in toward Roy, voice like a hiss. "Turn it off." Roy's voice came out calm, which almost scared me more. "No." Tessa stepped closer to Evan and put her hand on his forearm, like she was restraining a dog on a leash. "Evan, not here." He stared at her for a beat, then exhaled through his nose and forced his face back into "Family man." "Okay," Evan said, louder for anyone nearby. "We'll do it your way. Separate cars." I didn't trust that sentence. It sounded like a concession, but it felt like a repositioning. Evan pointed at Roy. "Dad rides with me. Mom follows." I shook my head. "No." Evan's smile tightened. "Mom, don't start." Roy stepped beside me. "We're not splitting up." Tessa said, too quickly, "It's just easier. Evan wants to talk to Roy one-on-one. Father-son." Father-son. Like the words were magic. Roy's eyes went hard. "You don't get to use that now." Evan's face twitched. "Then what do you want?" I said. We go in our vehicles. You lead. We follow. If we don't like where you're going, we turn around. Evan stared at me like he was deciding whether to fight it. Then he smiled again, sharp, controlled. Fine, follow me. He turned and opened his Explorer's driver door. Tessa slipped into the passenger seat like she'd been assigned there. They didn't look at the kids in my Camry. They didn't wave. They didn't say bye. That's another way you can tell it's not about family. Family includes the kids. Roy climbed into his white F-150, hands tight on the wheel. I walked to my Camry, tapped on the window, and Noah cracked it a couple inches. You did good, I whispered. You two just sit tight. Grandma's gonna drive, okay? Noah nodded, eyes serious. Mia's lower lip trembled. I swallowed hard. I love you. I love you, Mia whispered back. I got in, buckled them in like we were going to a soccer game, and pulled out. Evan's black Explorer rolled ahead. Roy's truck slid in between like a shield. For the first 5 minutes, Evan drove normal. Main roads, stoplights, Asheville looking like Asheville, mountains in the distance, gray sky, people just living their Saturday without knowing my whole life was tilting. Then Evan took the turn toward the Blue Ridge Parkway. Roy's brake lights flashed once. He slowed, then kept going. My stomach tightened. This was not a family day. This was a route. I pulled my phone out and, without thinking too hard, shared my location with Denise. I didn't announce it. I just did it. When someone has been controlling your life, you start learning how to build exits quietly. We climbed higher, winding roads, trees still bare in places, because March in North Carolina likes to pretend spring is coming while winter still has a hand on your ankle. The Explorer kept a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow, like Evan wanted control without attention. After about 20 minutes, my phone buzzed. Denise, I'm on it. Keep recording. If anything feels wrong, call 911 and stay in public. I didn't reply because I was watching the curve of the road and Roy's truck ahead of me and thinking about that word Evan used, closure. He wanted something closed. That didn't mean it was grief. Evan turned onto a smaller pull-off area with a sign that read, Overlook. Roy hesitated. I saw his truck drift slightly like he wanted to keep driving. Then Evan's Explorer stopped, and Tessa got out and waved like a tour guide. Roy pulled in. I pulled in behind Roy. The Overlook was quiet. 2 other cars parked farther down. A couple standing at the rail taking pictures like it was just another Saturday. Wind cut through the trees and made that hollow sound that always makes you feel small up there. Evan got out and clapped his hands once. Okay, this is it. Roy stepped out slow, like he was stepping onto ice. I opened my door and told Noah and Mia, stay buckled. Doors locked. Don't open for anybody. Noah swallowed and nodded. He was quiet. Too quiet. That boy was filing this away, and it broke my heart. I shut the door and walked to Roy. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the rail and the drop beyond it. Evan said, bright, you like it? It's beautiful. Tessa smiled and smoothed her hair. It's peaceful. Peaceful. Overlook. Drop. My skin went cold. Evan pulled the envelope with the power of attorney out of his jacket like he'd been waiting all day for this moment. We sign, we breathe, we move on. Roy didn't reach for it. No. Evan's smile faded. Dad. Roy's voice shook, but he held it. No. Evan looked at me. Mom, tell him. I said, we're not signing anything. Tessa sighed like we were toddlers. Then why did you come? Because you threatened our grandchildren, I said, and my voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Evan's eyes hardened. You're making me do this. Roy's shoulders stiffened. Do what? Evan took a step toward the rail and gestured with his chin. Come look. Roy didn't move. Evan's mouth curled. Dad, come on. You've been living with guilt for 25 years. Aren't you tired? Roy's face went ashen. I felt something in me tilt. How did Evan know Roy's guilt so precisely? Unless he'd been feeding on it. unless he'd been using it. Evan continued, voice low, almost gentle. You kept Mom in the dark. You kept her stuck. You want closure? Here it is. Tessa walked to the rail and leaned her elbows like she was at a scenic photo stop. Roy, just come here. Roy glanced at me. His eyes were wet. He whispered, this is wrong. I whispered back, we leave. We turned, both of us, and started walking back toward the cars. Evan's voice snapped, stop. Roy didn't stop. Evan shouted, stop walking away from me. That turned heads. The couple at the far rail glanced over. Good, I wanted witnesses. Roy kept walking. Then Evan moved fast. He grabbed Roy's shoulder from behind and yanked. Roy stumbled, caught himself, turned, and his voice went up for the first time all day. Don't touch me. Evan's face twisted. You don't get to tell me what I can touch anymore. That sentence hit like a slap. Because it wasn't about money now, it was about ownership. Tessa stepped closer to me, blocking my path like a polite wall. Marlene, don't do anything dramatic. My heart pounded. I looked past her at my Camry. The kids, locked in, watching. I swallowed and said, move. Tessa's smile stayed fixed. We just need a minute. Roy's iPhone was recording from his shirt pocket. I could see the slight outline of it. Evan leaned in close to Roy and said, low enough that I'm sure he thought the wind would hide it, if you don't sign, I'll make Mom look crazy and you know she won't survive that. Roy's face went rigid. Evan's voice got even lower, like a secret, just like Caleb didn't survive the truth. My blood turned to ice. Roy's breath hitched. What did you say? Evan smiled with his eyes. You heard me. That was the moment I truly realized Evan wasn't afraid of Caleb's death being re-examined. He was confident in it. Confidence like that doesn't come from innocence. Roy whispered, you did it. Evan shrugged like it was a mild disagreement. He was always going to leave you. Roy's jaw clenched. He was my son? Evan's eyes went flat. So was I. Then Evan looked at me and said, loud, Mom, do you see what I mean? He's unstable. He's losing it. Tessa nodded sympathetically like she was watching a tragedy play out. I took a step toward my car, and Tessa shifted with me, still blocking. I said, get out of my way. Tessa's smile tightened. You'll regret making me the bad guy. I stared at her. You made yourself the bad guy the minute you used your email to open a credit card in my husband's name. Her eyes flashed, then smoothed back out. You can't prove that. I said, actually, I can. Her expression tightened just a little, a crack. Then Evan did something I didn't expect. He turned to the rail like he was done arguing and said, fine. Then we do it your way. Come here, both of you. Roy didn't move. I didn't move. Evan's voice went sharp. Now. The other couple at the Overlook had stopped pretending not to stare. They were watching. Good. Roy's hands trembled. He said, we're leaving. Evan's face went blank. Completely blank. No smile. No warmth. Just emptiness. And that emptiness scared me more than anger. He said, very calmly, then you're going to fall. It took my brain a second to process the sentence. Roy made a sound like disbelief. What? Evan didn't answer. He stepped forward. Roy backed up instinctively, and that was the problem, because backing up near a rail is how you lose balance. I lunged toward Roy, and Tessa grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. I screamed, let go! Tessa hissed, stop fighting! Evan shoved Roy. Not a nudge, not a move, a shove with intention. Roy hit the rail, stumbled, and I saw his arms windmill for balance, like a man trying to stay on a dock in a storm. Then Evan shoved again. Everything went slow and fast at the same time. Roy's body tipped over the rail. I screamed his name and grabbed for him, and Tessa yanked me back. Then Evan's hand hit my shoulder, hard. I fell forward. The sky disappeared. The world flipped. For one sick, floating second, all I could see was gray clouds and bare branches and the idea that this was it. Then the fall became violence. Branches slapped my face, something ripped my jacket, my ribs screamed as I hit something hard, then slid, dirt in my mouth, blood, the sound of Roy somewhere below me, an ugly grunt that told me he was still alive. I crashed onto a slope and didn't go all the way down. Thank God for stubborn trees and dumb luck. I lay there, chest heaving, tasting metal, and I forced my eyes open because I needed to know if Roy was alive. Roy! I croaked. Below me, maybe 10 feet, Roy was wedged against a tree trunk, one leg twisted, breathing like he'd been punched. His shirt was torn. His face was streaked with dirt and blood. He looked up at me and his lips moved. "Phone," he whispered. My brain snapped to it. Roy's iPhone, the recording. I clawed at my pocket. My iPhone was gone, lost in the fall. Of course it was. Roy's iPhone was still in his shirt pocket, miraculously still there. Roy's hand shook as he fumbled for it. He pulled it out and the screen was cracked but lit. He looked at it like it was a lifeline. Above us, I heard muffled voices. Evan's voice, clear through the trees, like he didn't even care if we heard. "Are they gone?" Tessa's voice answered, breathy, excited. "Excited? I think so." Then Evan laughed. A short laugh, the kind you do when something worked. My stomach turned. Evan said, "That was cleaner than last time." "Last time?" Roy's eyes went wide with horror. Tessa said, Okay, stop. We need to get back before anyone starts asking questions." Evan's voice dropped, and through the branches I caught it like a knife. Nobody's asking. They never asked about Caleb either. My body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. Roy's hand shook so badly he almost dropped the phone. I reached down and steadied his wrist. The recording was still going. The audio was still capturing their voices above us. That phone was the weapon. Not a gun, not a knife. Proof. Roy whispered, eyes wet. "They're confessing." I swallowed blood and said, "Save it." Above, footsteps on gravel. Car doors. The engine of the Explorer starting. Then, finally, the sound of it pulling away. I lay there, half crumpled on the slope, listening to their car disappear like a bad dream driving off. The couple at the overlook. I didn't know if they'd seen. I didn't know if they'd heard. I didn't know anything, except my ribs were on fire and Roy's face looked wrong. I tried to move, and pain shot through me so hard I saw white. Roy whispered, "Marlene, we need help." I nodded, then realized he couldn't see it well. "Okay," I rasped. "Okay." My hands shook as I grabbed at branches and tried to pull myself up. My arms felt weak. My ribs screamed. But adrenaline is a liar. It tells you can do anything until it runs out. Roy attempted to stand and collapsed with a strangled sound. "Leg," he gasped. "My leg." I fought panic. Panic wastes oxygen, and I needed oxygen. I looked up the slope toward the rail. It felt like a mile. My voice came out sharp, because sometimes you have to bark at reality. We are not dying down here. Roy blinked at me, stunned. I continued, teeth clenched. Not after that. Not after hearing them say Caleb's name like that. Roy swallowed hard and nodded, like that sentence hooked him to the ground. I crawled. There's no other word for it. I crawled like an animal, grabbing roots, hauling my body up inch by inch, dirt under my nails, blood drying on my chin. Halfway up, my hand closed around something hard. My iPhone. It was wedged between rocks like it had decided to wait for me. Screen cracked, case scuffed, but it was there. I pressed the side button. Black. Dead. Of course. I shoved it in my pocket anyway, like it was comforting to have it, even lifeless. When I reached the edge of the overlook, I pulled myself over the lip and lay on the gravel. heaving like I'd run miles. The couple that had been there was gone. No one, just whined and the empty parking spaces and the smear of chaos Evan left behind. I dragged myself to my Camry, each step a separate argument with pain. The kids were still inside. They were crying. Noah was trying so hard to be brave. I yanked the door open and Noah burst out, voice breaking. "Grandma! Grandpa!" I grabbed him and Mia both, squeezing them too hard. "I'm okay," I lied. "I'm okay." Noah's eyes went huge when he saw the blood on my face. "You're not okay." "I'm okay enough," I said, and I forced myself to sound steady because those babies did not need to watch me fall apart too. I pointed to my keys. "Noah, listen, you're going to be my helper. You hear me?" He nodded, shaking. "You're going to hold Mia's hand and stay buckled. Do not unbuckle until I say. Got it?" He nodded again, swallowing hard. I closed their doors and stumbled to Roy's truck. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys once. I picked them up and tried to get my breath. Roy was still down there. My legs threatened to give out, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't. I found a park ranger pickup area a little down the road. Thank God there was one nearby, and I flagged a truck with my arms like a lunatic. The man who stopped, middle-aged, ball cap, hiking boots, jumped out, eyes wide. "Ma'am, what happened?" "My husband," I rasped, "fell over the rail. He's alive. Please call 911. The man didn't ask for a story. He just pulled out his phone and called. I gave directions between breaths, pointing, showing him the overlook. Within minutes, maybe 10, maybe 20, time was jelly. Sirens cut through the trees. Paramedics, a park ranger, people with radios, people with ropes. They got Roy out with a stretcher and a lot of careful swearing. Roy's face was gray. His leg was splinted. His eyes found mine, and he mouthed, "Phone." I held up his iPhone, the cracked screen, and he blinked like he might cry. At the ambulance, I climbed in with him because I wasn't letting him out of my sight. Noah and Mia rode with the ranger in his truck down the mountain to the hospital, Mission Hospital in Asheville, with a paramedic sitting with them. That part broke me, but it was the only way. On the ride, Roy's fingers trembled around his iPhone. He unlocked it with shaking hands and hit stop on the recording. He didn't play it. He didn't need to. We both knew what was on there. He opened messages and sent the audio file to Denise. I watched him do it. I watched the little sending bar crawl across the screen like our entire future depended on Wi-Fi. That was receipt number 1 down the mountain, a time-stamped confession traveling to someone Evan couldn't delete. Roy whispered, "If they take this, if they destroy it." "They won't," I said, and my voice came out like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. But the truth is, I wasn't promising him. I was promising Caleb. At the ER, everything became fluorescent and fast. Nurses in scrubs, questions, blood pressure cuffs, consent forms shoved at me while my hands trembled. A nurse with dark hair pulled back tight. Priya Shah, her badge said, leaned close and spoke gently. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" "Marlene," I wheezed. "Marlene Whitaker." "And your husband?" "Roy." She nodded, efficient. "We're going to get him pain control and imaging. You're bleeding from the mouth. Did you lose consciousness?" "I don't think so," I said. My breath hitched. "My son pushed us." Priya's eyes flicked up, sharp. "Your son did what?" My throat closed. Saying it out loud made it real in a way my body wasn't ready for. "He shoved us off an overlook." Priya didn't react like she didn't believe me. She reacted like she'd just been handed a live wire. She said, "Do you feel safe right now?" "No," I whispered. A security guard appeared like he'd been waiting for that word. They wheeled Roy away, and I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me. "We need you to stay here a moment, ma'am." I was trembling so hard I couldn't hide it anymore. Then my cracked iPhone, miraculously charging now because someone plugged it in for me, buzzed with a text from Denise. "Denise, I got the audio. I'm calling APD and telling them you have confession on file. Stay alive. I stared at the words until they blurred. That was receipt number 2, confirmation that the proof survived the mountain. A nurse handed me a paper bag from my bloody jacket, and the smell of dirt and leaves hit me and I almost threw up. Then I heard Evan's voice. Not in my head, in the hallway. Bright, concerned, performative. Where are they? I got a call something happened to my parents. I turned my head, and there he was, walking into the ER like he was starring in a tragedy he didn't create. Tessa beside him, face pinched into the perfect expression of worry. They must have gone home, dropped the kids, then come right back to control the story. Evan spotted me and hurried over, hands out. Mom! Oh my God! I flinched away before he could touch me. His eyes widened, like my reaction was the real crime. What happened? We got separated. Tessa and I went to find help. Liar. Smooth liar. He was already rewriting. Tessa clasped her hands to her chest. Marlene, we were terrified. We thought you fell. We didn't know where you were. I stared at her and felt my whole body go still again. The same stillness I'd felt when Evan threatened the kids. The same stillness that told me, you are watching predators pretend to be family. I said, loud enough for the triage area to hear, don't come near me. Evan blinked. Mom, why are you acting like... Because you pushed us, I said. My voice shook, but it carried. The hallway quieted in that way hospitals do, people pretending not to listen while listening hard. Evan's face did this quick flicker, shock, anger, calculation, then grief, like he was choosing an expression off a menu. He said, that's not true. I nodded toward the security guard. Keep him away from me. The guard stepped between us. Evan's voice rose a notch, indignant. Are you serious? I'm her son. The guard didn't care. Sir, step back. Tessa's eyes darted around, scanning for who was watching, always scanning. Evan looked at me with that fake heartbreak face. Mom, you're in shock. You fell. You're confused. I laughed once, and it hurt my ribs like a stab. I'm not confused. Then I saw it. Priya shot at the nurses, station, watching all of this, her face tight. Evan turned slightly, like he was adjusting his angle to the room, and lowered his voice. Where's Dad? I didn't answer. He leaned closer anyway, trying to look past the guard. Mom, tell me where Dad is. I still didn't answer. Evan's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped into something colder, meant only for me. If you think you can ruin my life with some story, remember what happened to Caleb. My blood turned to ice again. Priya's head snapped up like a dog hearing a whistle. Evan must have noticed her movement because his face reset instantly. He smiled at the guard. Sir, I'm just trying to help my mom. Priya stepped forward, calm but firm. Ma'am, can you come with me? I followed her without thinking. My legs felt like paper. Priya guided me into a small side room, shut the door, and lowered her voice. I heard him say that name, Caleb. You said your son pushed you. Is there a history here? My throat burned. I nodded. My older son disappeared, years ago. Priya's eyes went hard with focus. Do you have any proof of what happened today? I swallowed. My husband recorded them, on his iPhone. Priya nodded once, like that was the key in a lock. Okay, I'm going to call hospital security, and I'm also going to notify law enforcement. You do not talk to them alone. Do you understand? I nodded, shaking. She handed me a tissue. My hands crumpled it like it was useless. Priya stepped out, and through the little window in the door, I watched her speak to a supervisor and then to security. I watched her point, subtle, professional, toward Evan and Tessa. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from Marcus Ellison. Roy's location shared to Denise shows hospital. Are you safe? APD detective en route. Do not sign anything. Do not speak alone. Marcus didn't waste words. Bless him. Receipt number 3. That text, that warning, that record that people knew what was happening in real time. I sat there breathing through pain, trying to keep myself from shaking apart, and I realized something terrifying and clarifying. Evan and Tessa didn't know Roy's phone captured their voices after the fall. They thought they were clean, and the cleanest criminals are always the cockiest. A little while later, again, time was jelly. An Asheville police detective walked into my room with a calm face that didn't match the chaos in my chest. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "I'm Detective Andre Collins." I nodded. He pulled out a small notebook. "I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm going to ask you questions, and I need you to answer as clearly as you can." I took a breath. "Okay." He started with basics. Names, ages, relationship. Then he asked, "Where did this occur?" "Blue Ridge Parkway Overlook," I said. "Evan drove us there after lunch." "And you're stating your son pushed you and your husband?" "Yes." Detective Collins looked at me for a long moment like he was weighing whether I could handle the next question. "Do you have any evidence?" he asked. I swallowed. My husband's iPhone recorded them. After we fell, they talked at the rail. They said, my throat closed. They said it was cleaner than last time. Detective Collins's face changed, just slightly, but it changed. He said, "Where is the phone now?" "Roy has it," I said. "It's cracked, but it works." He sent the audio to my sister Denise. Detective Collins nodded. "Good. We'll secure it from your husband as well. We'll get a copy from your sister." My heart pounded. Are you going to arrest them?" Detective Collins didn't promise. He didn't do TV drama. He said, carefully, "We need to review the evidence, but if what you're saying is on that recording, yes, we can take action quickly." Quickly. That word felt like water in my mouth after a fire. From the hallway, I could hear Evan's voice again, louder now, frustrated. "Why can't I see my dad? He's my father!" Hospital security's voice, flat. "Not right now, sir." Tessa's voice chimed in, sweet but sharp. "This is ridiculous. We're family." Family, the word they used like a pass. Detective Collins stood. "I'm going to go speak with your husband now. Stay here. If your son tries to approach you, call the nurse." When he left, my body finally shook. Not a little tremble. A full body tremor like my nervous system was trying to reboot. Priya came back in and put a hand on my shoulder, light, respectful. "You did the right thing telling us." I swallowed hard. "He's going to say I'm crazy." Priya's eyes were steady. "Then we'll write down what we heard, and we'll keep you safe." I could have hugged her. I didn't. I just nodded and let tears slip, because the adrenaline was draining, and the pain was coming in hard now. A while later, Roy was wheeled past my door, headed toward imaging, and he turned his head just enough to look at me. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. He mouthed, "Audio." I nodded and mouthed back, "Denise has it." Roy blinked hard, like he was trying not to cry. Then Evan's voice rose again in the hallway. Too close. "Dad, Dad, it's me." I shot to my feet without thinking, and pain lanced through my ribs so sharp I gasped. Priya stepped in front of me. "Stay." Through the door window, I saw Evan trying to angle around security, trying to catch Roy's eye on the stretcher. Tessa hovered behind him, one hand on his back, whispering something in his ear. Evan leaned in toward Roy, and even through glass I could see the way his mouth moved. Fast, intense. He was trying to speak without being heard. But Priya was close, close enough. Her posture changed, her eyes sharpened. Evan's face stiffened, then he stepped back like he realized too late he wasn't alone. Priya turned and walked away quickly, heading toward the nurses' station. I sat back down, heart racing, and my phone buzzed again. A new text from Denise. "Detective Collins just called me. He asked for the audio. I'm sending it to his secure email. Evan is cooked." Cooked. Denise's word. Denise's bluntness. I stared at that sentence until it stopped being just text and started being reality. Then a cold thought slid into my mind. If Evan realizes the audio exists, he's going to try to destroy it. And he's standing in the same hospital as the phone that made it. A minute later, Detective Collins came back into my room, and his face was different now. not emotional, focused. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I just listened to part of the recording your sister forwarded." My mouth went dry. "And?" He didn't repeat the words. He didn't need to. He said, "We're treating this as an attempted homicide." My vision tunneled. The room tilted. Attempted homicide. It was such a formal phrase for something so personal. I whispered, "Are they going to leave?" Detective Collins shook his head. "We have units on their vehicle. Hospital security has been instructed not to allow them back to your husband. We're also pulling the hospital surveillance footage from the entrance and hallway." Surveillance. Receipts stacked on receipts. Detective Collins looked at me and said, "Do you have any other documentation of threats, text messages, recordings?" I nodded, grabbed my iPhone, and scrolled with shaking fingers. I showed him Evan's texts. The "Saturday isn't optional." The threat about never seeing Noah and Mia again. The "good." I showed him the screenshot of the POA form in the envelope because I'd snapped it fast at the diner before we even left. Detective Collins's eyebrows lifted slightly. He said, "We'll download these." He handed me a small card with a case number and his name. "Keep this. If anyone contacts you, do not engage. Tell them to speak to law enforcement." I nodded, throat tight. Then the hallway erupted again. A sharp male voice, Evan's, followed by a firm, louder response from security. "What do you mean I can't leave?" Evan demanded. Detective Collins's gaze snapped toward the door. He said quietly, "Stay here." He stepped out. I couldn't see everything, but I could hear it. The scuffle of shoes. The buzz of voices. Someone saying, "Sir, turn around." Someone else saying, "You're detaining me for what?" Tessa's voice rose, panicked now. "Evan, stop, stop." Then a new voice, calm, authoritative. Detective Collins, likely. "Evan Whitaker, turn around and place your hands behind your back." My breath caught. I pressed my hand to my mouth and tasted blood again. Then Evan shouted something that made my stomach flip. "You can't do this. Ask her. She's confused." And then, clear as a bell, Tessa said, "This isn't what it sounds like." Lies always sound the same when they're cornered. Loud, rushed, desperate. I sat there shaking, listening to my son's life snap shut in real time, but I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt grief so heavy it made my ribs ache worse than the fall. Because no matter what Evan became, there was a version of him I used to hold in my arms. And that version was gone. Priya came back into my room, eyes wide but controlled. She shut the door behind her and said, "They're placing him under arrest in the hallway. They're bringing additional officers for the wife." My throat closed. "Is Roy okay?" Priya nodded. "He's stable. He's in imaging. He asked for you." I let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and it hurt like hell. Then my phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Just a photo. A blurry image of Noah and Mia sitting in a car, my Camry, taken from outside a window. The angle was wrong, like someone had snapped it quickly. Under it, one line. "Last chance to shut up." My blood went ice cold. Because Evan might have been in handcuffs inside this hospital. But somebody was watching my grandkids outside. And in that second, I realized the nightmare wasn't done with us yet. Stay with me, because the next call I made wasn't to the police. It was to make sure Noah and Mia didn't vanish before my eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just stared at that blurry photo of Noah and Mia through my cracked screen, and something in me went so quiet it felt like a room with the door shut. Then I stood up and walked straight to the nurse's station. Priya looked up immediately. She saw my face and didn't ask me to calm down. She just said, "What is it?" I held my phone out. "Someone took this, just now, in the hospital parking lot." Her eyes tightened. "Your car is outside." "My Camry," I said. "The kids are in it." Priya's jaw clenched. She turned and waved over security like she'd done it 100 times. I need an officer out to the parking lot right now. Possible threat to children. Their grandmother is a patient. The security guard didn't debate it. He picked up his radio and started talking fast. I heard Detective Collins's voice in the hall, already moving, already commanding. "What's going on?" I stepped out, held up the phone again. "This just came in. Unknown number." Detective Collins took one look, and his expression changed from investigation to urgent. "Where are your grandkids exactly?" he asked. "In my car," I said. "They're locked in. They've been there since the overlook." He didn't scold me. He didn't lecture. He said, "Okay, stay with me." He motioned to two uniformed officers. "Parking lot. Now, find the vehicle. Secure the kids. Check cameras. Check entrances." My heart hammered. I forced words out. Roy's still in imaging." "I know," he said. "We'll keep him protected. Right now, we get those kids." The scariest part was how professional everyone suddenly became, like the hospital itself shifted from treat injuries to lock it down. Priya gripped my shoulder for half a second. "You did the right thing." I whispered, "If I lose them?" "You won't," she said, and her voice didn't waver. A few minutes later, maybe 5, maybe 10, time had stopped behaving. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. "Walk away. We walk away." That was it. No emoji, no fluff. Just a sentence meant to make me feel small. I didn't reply. Silence is a weapon, too. Detective Collins held out his hand. "May I?" I handed him my iPhone. He photographed the message, the number, the timestamp. He turned the screen so a uniformed officer could take pictures, too. Then he looked at me. "Do you have the porch recording? The diner audio? Anything else?" "My husband's phone has the mountain audio," I said. "Denise has the file." "I'm aware," he said, and that told me Denise was already in motion behind the scenes like she always is. "We're going to add these threats to the file." File, evidence, documentation. All the things Evan hated. Then my phone, now back in my hand, lit up with Denise's name. I answered so fast I almost dropped it. "Denise." Her voice came sharp and controlled. "They've got eyes on the Camry?" "Police are going," I said. "Good," she snapped. "And Marlene, listen to me. Don't respond to that number. It's bait." "I know," I said, though my throat felt tight. Denise lowered her voice. "They're trying to scare you into silence. You're past the point of silence." She was right. Silence had already cost us Caleb. A nurse came briskly down the hall and said, "Mrs. Whitaker, the children have been brought inside." My knees almost buckled. I followed her and found Noah and Mia sitting in a small family waiting room, wrapped in thin hospital blankets like little burritos, eyes red from crying. A police officer stood by the door. Another sat across the hall like a statue. Noah shot up when he saw me. "Grandma!" I dropped into a crouch and hugged them both, and I didn't care who was watching. My ribs screamed, but I held them anyway. Mia pressed her face into my neck. I was scared. "I know," I whispered, kissing her hair. "I know. You did exactly what I said. You were so brave." Noah's voice shook. A man came up to the window. He took a picture. I didn't unlock it. I didn't. "I believe you," I said instantly. "You did perfect." The officer cleared his throat gently. "Ma'am, we're reviewing camera footage from the lot. We're also pulling hospital exterior footage. We have the number that texted you." I nodded like I could handle that information, but inside I was shaking hard enough I felt it in my teeth. Detective Collins came into the room. He crouched a little so he wasn't towering over the kids. "Hey, Noah. Hey, Mia, you're safe, okay?" Noah nodded. Mia just clung to my arm like I was the only solid thing left in the world. Detective Collins looked at me. "We're going to contact Buncombe County DSS since their parents are being taken into custody tonight. We need a temporary placement plan." That sentence should have shattered me. Instead, it made me feel something I hadn't felt in days. Direction. I said, "They stay with us." He nodded. "That's the goal, but we'll do it the right way." The right way. Paperwork. Court stamps. Adults with clipboards. For once, The system was going to work in our favor. An hour later, a DSS caseworker arrived. She spoke softly to the kids, asked gentle questions, gave them juice boxes like that, could patch a day like this. She asked me and Roy questions too, but Roy wasn't there yet. He was still being scanned, still being stitched, still being pulled back from the edge of a mountain. So it was me, bloody lip, bruised ribs, shaking hands, trying to sound like a stable grandmother. I told her the truth. Their parents were arrested here. The children were with me. There have been threats. The caseworker glanced at the officer and then back at me. "Do you have a safe home?" "Yes," I said. "And my sister Denise is nearby." Denise, like she was summoned by her name, walked into the waiting room 10 minutes later with her purse on her shoulder and her face set like a storm front. She hugged Noah and Mia carefully, then looked me dead in the eye. "You okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm standing." Denise nodded, satisfied. "Good." That night, the paperwork was filed for emergency placement. Noah and Mia were released into my care on the spot with an officer escorting us to the parking garage like we were VIPs in the worst club on earth. Before we left, Detective Collins pulled me aside. We identified who took the photo. My stomach flipped. Who? He didn't give me a name. He kept it careful. A female associate of Tessa's. She's in custody for questioning. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Collins's eyes held mine. "They're trying to intimidate you. That ends tonight." That was a line I replayed later, because it felt like the first time an adult man had said, "I've got you," and meant it. When we finally got home, it was close to midnight. Asheville was quiet. The mountains outside my window looked like sleeping animals, big, indifferent, ancient. Noah and Mia fell asleep in my bed, both of them, one on either side of me like I was a life raft. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened to every creak of our house. Fear is loud at night. Around 2 a.m., my iPhone buzzed, an email this time, from Wells Fargo. Fraud claim status update. I opened it with shaking fingers. It confirmed the Zelle transfer was under investigation and that additional access attempts had been blocked due to our new security settings. That email wasn't emotional, but it was a receipt, a paper trail that said, "You weren't imagining it." The next morning, Roy was transferred from the ER to a room upstairs. I went to see him while Denise stayed home with the kids like the auntie bouncer she is. Roy looked wrecked. His face had bruises like watercolor, and his leg was elevated, wrapped, strapped, but his eyes were clear. He reached for my hand. The phone. I pulled his cracked iPhone 12 from my purse like it was sacred. Safe. His hand trembled as he touched it. It caught them. I nodded, swallowing hard. It caught them, saying it was cleaner than last time. Roy's eyes squeezed shut. A tear slid down into his hairline. He whispered, "Caleb." "I know," I said. "I know." A nurse came in with meds, and Roy forced himself to take them like a man swallowing the past. That week was a blur of hospital visits, bruises blooming across my body, Noah wetting the bed twice because his little brain couldn't process what it watched, Mia refusing to eat anything that wasn't plain bread. Trauma shows up in tiny, stubborn ways. But the legal machine, thank God, kept moving. Detective Collins met with us again. Marcus Ellison came to our house with a folder so thick it looked like a textbook. Denise sat at my kitchen table with her own notebook, because of course she did. Marcus said, Evan and Tessa's initial charges include attempted murder, felony assault, and financial crimes tied to identity theft and unauthorized access. Hearing it in clean legal language made my skin crawl. That's still my child's name sitting in those charges. Then Marcus added, the state will likely seek protective orders, and Marlene, DSS, will want a longer-term custody plan. I looked at Noah and Mia playing quietly on the living room rug, too quiet for their ages. They stay here, I said. Marcus nodded. Then we make it official. He slid a document across the table, an emergency custody petition with our names typed in, our Asheville address, and a line that read, temporary guardianship requested. Paper can feel like power when your world has been ripped open. We filed it. A week later, we stood in a courthouse hallway with fluorescent lights and too cold air, and Evan walked past me in handcuffs. He didn't look at me like a son. He looked at me like a problem. Tessa walked behind him, eyes darting, scanning faces like she was hunting for sympathy. She didn't find it in mine. Evan leaned toward me as the deputy guided him past and hissed, "You're gonna regret this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just said, "You should have thought of that before you put your hands on your father." His eyes flicked, just for a second, to something like surprise. Because I'd stopped speaking like his mother. I was speaking like his consequence. The hearing itself was short. The judge heard enough to issue a protective order, restrict contact, and keep Noah and Mia placed with us while the criminal case moved. When we walked out, Denise squeezed my shoulder and murmured, "He wanted to own you. Now he gets to meet the system." Cold satisfaction isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's a stamp on paper. Over the next couple months, more receipts came in like ugly mail. A letter from APS officially closing the case with no findings of incapacity. Bank records from Wells Fargo showing multiple login attempts from devices we didn't recognize, times lining up with Evan's helpful visits. A response from the credit card company confirming the application used Tessa's email address as the contact point. Every piece made my stomach hurt. Every piece also built a wall around us. Detective Collins told us they reopened Caleb's case based on Evan's statements and the mountain recording. He didn't promise miracles, he just said, "We're going to dig." That sentence alone felt like justice moving its feet. Then came the day Evan's public defender requested a plea. I didn't think I'd feel anything but rage. What I felt was relief so sharp it made me dizzy. The prosecutor laid it out in plain terms. The audio recording, the threats, the bank trail, hospital surveillance, and Priya's statement about what she heard Evan say in the hallway. That nurse, God bless her, put her name on the truth when she didn't have to. Evan's plea wasn't, "I did it." It was the kind of plea that tries to dodge soul and stick to strategy, but it included enough to lock him away for a long time. Tessa tried to fight longer. She painted herself as manipulated, as scared, as just a mom. But the receipts didn't care about her storyline. Emails don't cry. Bank logs don't blink. Eventually, she took her own deal. Fraud charges, conspiracy, and restrictions so tight, she'd need permission to breathe near her own kids again. The sentencing day was the first day I wore real shoes since the fall. I wore black flats and a blazer like I was going back to my old job, because I needed armor that looked normal. Roy came in on crutches, jaw set, eyes tired. Noah and Mia didn't come. They didn't need to see their parents in chains. Denise stayed home with them and baked brownies, because Denise's love always shows up as food. In court, Evan stood in an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not innocent, just reduced. When it was my turn to speak, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the podium. I didn't give a speech full of poetry. I didn't perform pain for strangers. I said, "I'm 60 years old. I raised my children in this city. I buried one son and spent 25 years thinking it was an accident, because that's what the story was. Then my other son tried to kill me and my husband to take what we worked for." Evan stared straight ahead. Tessa kept dabbing at her eyes like she was the victim. I looked at the judge and said, "I want my grandkids safe. I want my husband to heal. And I want the court to understand something. What they did wasn't a moment. It was a plan." My voice cracked on the last word, but I didn't apologize for it. Roy spoke too. He said, "I kept quiet once. I won't do it again." That line almost dropped me to my knees. The judge sentenced Evan to a long stretch, long enough that Noah and Mia will be adults before he's free. Tessa got less time, but more supervision than she expected, and her contact with the kids became structured, monitored, and earned the hard way. When the gavel came down, it didn't sound like vengeance. It sounded like an ending to a chapter. Outside the courthouse, Roy and I stood on the steps, the March wind cutting through our clothes, and I realized My hands were no longer shaking. Not because I was over it, because the fear had nowhere left to hide. In the months that followed, life turned into appointments. Roy's physical therapy, Noah's counseling, Mia's night terrors easing slowly like a storm passing, DSS home visits, court check-ins, bank statements that finally looked boring again. Boring became beautiful. Marcus updated our will the right way, clear, locked down, with protections and witnesses, and no convenient loopholes. We set up a trust for Noah and Mia that couldn't be hijacked by anyone's charm. Wells Fargo reversed the fraudulent transfer after the investigation closed. Vanguard helped us secure the IRA access and flag any unusual movement. Each little administrative victory felt like reclaiming a brick from a burned house. And then, one afternoon, Detective Collins called. His voice was steady. "Mrs. Whitaker, I wanted you to hear this from me. We have new evidence in Caleb's case. We can't discuss details yet, but I can tell you this. Your son's death is no longer being treated as an accident." I sat down right there on my kitchen chair, like my legs forgot how to hold me. I didn't cry at first. I just stared at the wall. Then the tears came, quiet and heavy, like rain after drought. After I hung up, I walked into the living room where Noah was doing homework and Mia was coloring. Roy was in his recliner with his leg propped up, watching them like they were the center of the universe. I said, "They're reopening Caleb, for real." Roy's face crumpled. He covered his mouth with his hand like he was trying to keep grief from escaping. Noah looked up. "Caleb was my uncle, right?" "Yes," I said softly. Mia looked at me with wide eyes. "Is he coming back?" My heart broke in the old familiar way. "No, baby, but the truth is. Truth is not a hug. Truth is a light." That night, after the kids were asleep, Roy and I sat at our oak table again, the same one that held Sunday dinners and grief and threats and paperwork. Roy reached across and took my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. "We did what we could with what we knew." Roy nodded, tears in his eyes. "And we're doing it now." I looked at him and felt something that surprised me. Not happiness. Peace. Because Evan tried to turn our family into a bank account. And all he did was turn himself into evidence. So yeah, that's where we are. Noah and Mia are safe in our home in Asheville. Roy's healing. I'm healing in my own way. Slow, stubborn, messy. Denise still checks my locks like she's on patrol. Janine calls every Sunday and talks me down when the memories hit hard. And Caleb's name isn't a whisper anymore. It's a case. If you love karma stories where the truth wins, hit subscribe because I've got plenty more to tell, and I'm done being quiet.